Thank you so Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm one of three Betsy's here tonight. My name is Betsy Smulyan. I'm serving as the interim CEO of Together Women Rise. I think everyone knows that Rise is in the process of recruiting a permanent CEO. And I think you all know Wendy, our Director of Membership and Communications. So just a couple of housekeeping things before I introduce our guest speaker for tonight, Cheryl Holland. Just some basic Zoom housekeeping. We'll ask everybody to be on mute while Cheryl is speaking and hold questions till the end, but you also use the chat function to put your questions there so that we can sort of keep track of them. We'll also ask you to just go into the chat now or at some point and just tell us where you're calling in from tonight. It's kind of always nice to see where everybody is. So if you can mute yourself with the mute button on the bottom left of your screen would be great. And then maybe we can unmute when they're at the end for questions. I think that's it. So I want to introduce, we're so lucky to have Cheryl Holland here tonight as a speaker. Cheryl is a certified financial planner. She's the president and founder of Abacus Planning Group, a holistic financial advisory firm with over $1.7 billion in assets. Yes, that was a B. She consistently appears on top advisor lists such as Barron's Top Advisors, Barron's 100 Top Women Advisors, Financial Times 300, and she was recognized by the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors as one of the 30 most influential people in its 30-year history. Cheryl's also a dedicated volunteer, as you can see by her presence here tonight, both in her profession and her community. She's a member of the RISE chapter in Columbia, South Carolina. She's also a member of the Bryn Mawr College Board of Trustees, the Clemson University Foundation Board, and the American Red Cross Tiffany Circle, among others. Cheryl is married with one daughter. She enjoys reading, counting hummingbirds, and weeding her herb garden. So Cheryl, thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Betsy, thank you. How wonderful for all of us to be gathering on Giving Tuesday. So I welcome those of us from around the country. You might be East Coast time as I am, and I have to apologize. I am in a Marriott hotel. Missed my flight to Palm Beach and for a Barron's Women's speech tomorrow, but I think we're going to have fun if you can excuse the mediocre art in the background. So I wanted to just touch base very quickly. Let's see, Wendy, if you'll go ahead and start the slideshow or go to the agenda. I think what's so wonderful about gathering tonight is I had read a statistic that a third of all gifts are given in the last month of the year, and 12% of all charitable giving is done in the last 3 days of the year. So it's a wonderful time to be thinking together about how we give, how we impact, and how we can leverage, maximize, demystify the way we give so that we can share more with the resources we have in a productive way. So tonight I'm going to talk about several ways of giving for about 20 minutes so we can turn it into a conversation, which I think will be much more interesting and richer. And I've decided there's a reason that TED Talks are 20 minutes. That's about the limit of everyone's attention span for listening to one person talk. So Wendy, if you don't mind, if you can go to slide 3. So I titled the agenda From the Simple to the Complex, but it won't be that complex. Maybe it's from the simple to the elegant, although simple, as we know, can be elegant too as women. I'm going to talk about the simplicity of giving cash and what that might mean, particularly in the tax year of 2021. Then I'm going to move on to talking about those of you who may own stock or mutual funds that have appreciated over time. Talk more about those of us who are over 72 and a half and over 70 and a half, and the ways you might be able to give from your retirement accounts is quite powerful. And then I'll move into probably the most powerfully growing way of giving, and that is using a donor advised fund. And then top off with how we might think about giving after death, and simple ways to do that that might continue to impact women's issues around the world, and what we're doing together at Together Women Rise. So if you'll go to the next slide, Wendy. I think, and yes, we will have access to the recording and the slideshow, and there's a list of resources at the end. So I'll just say briefly, my mom was an elementary school librarian, so I do nothing without a bibliography. So many of the websites and books that I will refer to are listed in detail at the end of the recording, at the end of the session, in a resources list, so that you can do more homework on your own. And this 20 minutes, my goal is to give you ideas, spark creativity and thinking about your charitable giving, and then give you the resources to go and do more thinking together with family members or your tax advisors or your financial advisor on how you might increase your impact of giving. So what's new in 2021? Well, Congress decided to extend the changes that were made in 2020 for philanthropic giving due to COVID. And what was wonderful about last year, for all its many, many challenges, I just read a statistic today that more philanthropic dollars were given last year since that number was tracked beginning in the early 70s. So some of that probably had to do with all of us knowing there was greater need. It also probably had to do with some of the changes that Congress passed for tax laws. So I just want to talk about what it means to give cash in 2021. So I'm going to think first about my daughter, who's 27 years old, and she files a simple tax return, and she doesn't have a house yet. And so she just uses the standard deduction. She files her tax return with her W-2, and then she takes the standard deduction. And if she gave any charitable gifts, she doesn't get to itemize those on her tax return. Well, this year, if she gives $300 to charity, she can report her taxable income and then take her standard deduction. And in addition to that, she can deduct $300 of giving against her taxable income. So it's a great year for anyone who's new to giving. As a single individual, they can get $300 and make that as a deduction, and couples can do $600. So that's one change for this year. In addition to that, cash contributions only are eligible for up to 100% deduction against your adjusted gross income. So to decipher that into plain English, when you file your taxes and you add up all of your income, if you're still working, if you're getting Social Security, dividends from your stock portfolio, distributions from your IRA, any rental income, you add up all those numbers, the bottom of that first page is your adjustable gross income. And if that is $250,000, the IRS is now saying, and you give $250,000 to charity, you can 100% deduct all of that cash this year. Typically, it's only 60%. So if you have a reason that this year you want to completely eradicate your income taxes, and I wouldn't advocate for that necessarily, you can do that. There might be good reasons to just give 80% and pay a little bit of tax at a very low tax bracket. So those are two ways that cash is king, or perhaps I should say cash is queen in 2021. If you're a corporation that you're making contributions to your company, 25% of taxable income for C corporations is eligible for deductions in 2021. And then there is a 5-year carry forward where cash gifts. So if you, for some strange reason, this is a big year where you want to make an impact and you had $250,000 of income and you wanted to give $300,000, the way it works always is you can deduct $250,000 this year, and that extra $50,000 can carry forward to deduct against income for up to 5 years. And that's always true. So whenever you make a gift, and you're given in excess of what the IRS will allow you to deduct, you have a 5-year carry forward. But this year, the big deal is cash, especially for people who are not able to make a deduction of $300, and for everyone else up to 100%. So let's go to the, so cash is always a simple, you write a check, you're done. The second technique that I have a client, for example, and believe it or not, she bought into Amazon when it first came out. So you can imagine the growth she's had in her portfolio. That single tens of thousands of dollars investment is now worth tens of millions of dollars. But if she sells that stock and gave it to Gather Women Rise, she would have to pay taxes on the gain on that. So a smarter strategy for all of us on this webinar, if we have a mutual fund or a stock that is appreciated in value, is to call up Wendy or someone at Together Women and say, I want to make a gift of stock. And they will happily take your $25,000 or $5,000 or $1,000 gift of stock. Then what happens is Together Women Rise sells that stock, and when they sell it on the day they get it, they, as a nonprofit, owe no taxes on it. So you've given, let's say, a $10,000 gift of stock, and you get to make a $10,000 deduction on your taxes. And then when Together Women Rise sells that, it's a really smart way. They pay no taxes. They get the full 10,000 as opposed to what you would have gotten, which is your charitable, which is your what you sold the stock for, less the taxes you pay. So it's always very wise, if you have charitable intent, to think very seriously about giving stock rather than giving cash. So it eliminates your tax liability. It also allows you to rebalance your portfolio. So after these 2 great years in the stock market, and we're thinking about clients and we're trimming those gains, we always say to a client, if you have a charitable intent, rather than selling so that we get your portfolio rebalanced as it's grown its stock portfolio, would you rather us give this to a charity as we do that? So it helps you also rebalance your portfolio. So when you're talking to your portfolio advisor, always make sure you communicate your charitable goals to them so they can make their portfolio returns more tax efficient. As I've already talked about, if you've got a concentrated exposure to a single stock because you've worked at a company your entire life, or you bought into a company at an early stage in its growth, then you can, one of the best ways to narrow that exposure over time, if you have charitable intent, is to give that stock away to charity, and sometimes to your adult children too, because they may be in a lower tax bracket if they sell the stock. Now, some of my clients, I had a client come in the other day, and she had inherited some stock from her mother. It's appreciated nicely, but you know, her mom had inherited that stock from her mother, and it's a really important stock in that family, and they use the dividends to do fun treats for themselves. And so they have an emotional attachment, which can be understandable in that situation, given the hierarchy of having the gift over time, and they want to make sure they own the stock. So in her case, we talked about, well, what if we gave away these shares of Exxon and immediately bought you some new ones, because you were giving away your gain, and when we buy Exxon again, you're buying it at the lower tax bracket. And she really liked that idea, so that we didn't give cash. We gave her Exxon shares away, gave away that tax liability because a charity sold that stock, and we took her cash instead of giving it away, and immediately bought more Exxon, so that if she ever does sell it, it has a higher basis and she would pay less taxes in the future too. And as we've talked about, there's a 5-year carry forward for gifts of appreciated equities. You cannot deduct 100% of your gifts against your taxable income if it's an appreciated asset. You can only deduct 30%. But if I made $100,000 this year and wanted to give away $50,000, I can deduct the appreciated stock. I can deduct the $30,000. But that $20,000 I get to deduct next year. So just want to give you some of the technical guidelines that go along with this. So cash is great. Even better is giving an appreciated stock or an appreciated mutual fund. Wendy, if you'll go to the next slide. So let's celebrate aging. I think that's one of the wonderful, powerful aspects of being a woman, is we understand the wisdom and the contentment and the joy that comes with aging. And one of the other nice things that comes with turning 70 and a half is, if you'll go to the next slide, Wendy, is about a decade ago, the Congress codified the ability to take the money that you're at age 70 and a half, you are allowed to take up to $100,000 out of your retirement plan. And as you know, if you've put money into your retirement plan, it went in pre-tax, it grew tax deferred, but when you take the money out, you have to pay taxes on that money. And when you take it out, you may, that turning 72 now, not 70 and a half, you have to take out a certain amount. The government gives you a calculation, and maybe you don't want to take out all that money. You can give that money to a qualified charity instead. And Together Women Rise qualifies as one of the IRS charities that you can do this with. So Wendy, if you'll go to that next slide, I'll go through the rules on this. So this is what my mom does. So every year she was a school teacher, she's an elementary school librarian as in the school system, and between her Social Security and her pension, and she saved very diligently in her 403B, she doesn't need all of her money. And so instead of giving cash, I sit down with her, and she wants to give some money to her church. She wants to give some money to some other charities. We do what we do. She has her money at Charles Schwab and Company. You might have it at Merrill Lynch, at Raymond James. But once you turn 70 and a half, you can direct that money up to $100,000, and as little as $1,000 can go directly to the charity rather than coming to you. And what I'd like to share about that that's so incredibly important is that it has to be paid directly to the charity. It can't come to you. But what's wonderful about doing this rather than cash or giving appreciated stock is if you took the money out of the retirement plan, it adds up on your adjustable gross income, and that impacts things like your Medicare premium. That impacts how much of your Social Security is taxable. So by taking the money out of your retirement plan, giving it directly to charity, it bypasses the other systems of taxation, like increasing your Medicare premium or taxing your Social Security more, whereas giving appreciated stock, it does not lower your, it doesn't have a positive impact on those areas. So I like doing a qualified charitable distribution first in almost every instance over appreciated securities and cash once you hit 70 and a half, if you have a retirement plan where you do not need all the distributions. So it's a really smart thing to do. There's a little gap now between 70 and a half where you can make a qualified charitable distribution and 72 when you have to begin taking your required minimum distribution. So you can begin the charitable gifting earlier in the year. Wendy, are you able? Now I'm going to go into, there's the talking points, and y'all, I talked you through, but again, you have to be 70 and a half to do that. It comes out of individual retirement accounts only. You cannot give it from a 401k or a 403b or a 457, which are the other types of charitable, but you can do something very sexy. Maybe I should talk about this. So I have a client who is has a very large 401k. He's 75. He's still working. But you know what we do every year? We take about $100,000 out of this 401k and we put it into an IRA, and then we give that away to the qualified charitable distribution. So when he gets older and he does retire and he has to start taking distributions from his 401k, then it would be a huge number, it'd be a huge taxation. It's not going to be that big of a tax burden on him. So there is a way around. It has to come from an individual retirement account. You just take it, roll it over from your 401k to your IRA, and then you can give it to a charity. The most you can give every year is $100,000, but you can give it to as many charities if you want. It has to go directly. And then I've already talked about the beauty of giving it this way rather than cash or appreciated securities. Now, the final technique that I'm going to talk about tonight for maximizing your gift is something you all may have heard more and more of, and that's a donor advised fund. And that's how often how my husband and I do our gifting. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about this. The first thing you have to do is pick somewhere to have your donor advised fund. That could be Vanguard, that could be Fidelity, and that could be Schwab. Those are three of my favorite options because they are very flexible, very well technically staffed. You can go online and see everything that's going on, and they're of the lower cost options of the different donor advised funds out there. And on the resource list, I'm listing out for you their websites and different places you can go to learn more about this. But basically what happens is you, the donor, give cash or more likely appreciated stock. It can even be something like real estate in certain instances. I have a client who's given oil and gas interest. I give shares of Abacus to my donor advised fund. When you do that, you get an immediate income tax deduction because that donor advised fund qualifies under IRS regulations as a charity. So, but here's the beauty of it. You make your gift now. So let's say this is a very high tax year. So I'm selling shares of Abacus to my other shareholders. I give my shares of Abacus to my donor advised fund. Then if they so choose, they buy the shares from my donor advised fund rather than from me. The cash goes into my donor advised fund. But I don't want to give away all that money in 2021. I want the tax deduction this year, but I might give that money to Gather, Grow, and Rise over a 5-year period, or I might give it to a scholarship at my college over a 5-year period. So the beauty of this is you can make the gift when you're ready to sell a piece of property and you don't need the money, you want to give it to charity, but then it buys you the time as long as you want to give it away. You can also invest that money once it goes into the donor advised fund and my shareholders buy shares of Abacus from me. I can invest that however I wish. I can leave it in cash. I can invest in the stock market. I can say to myself, I'm going to give this away over 10 years and I want to invest that and have it grow tax-free even more after some donor advised fund. So it's a very popular tool for even the most sophisticated donors are tending to shy away sometimes from creating family foundations that you may hear about because they don't want all the technical complications of doing that. And they'd rather use the donor advised fund where they have the flexibility investing for the long term, but they don't have all the IRS requirements that go along with having a foundation that's somewhat more complex and administrative burden to manage. Once you put the money in there, the only caveat I would say is you have to be careful that you give the money to an IRS qualified charity. And let's say you're going to a gala for the American Red Cross and you want to give them $10,000 for that. You cannot do that if you're going to get any benefits. So if you're getting a meal or any kind of economic benefit from going, you're not allowed to use dollars from your donor advised fund, but that's the only caveat. You can't give to individuals, which would not be a charitable deduction anyway. And I know, for example, at Fidelity and Schwab, if they've never given money to the charity you're asking, they have to research and make sure it is IRS qualifying. So that can take a little bit of time. So if you can keep going. Oh, Judy, I see a question there. What's the difference between adjusted gross income and modified? So, wow, without my handy reference in front of me, but adjusted gross. So, for example, my husband is an architect, and the way he's set up is a limited liability company. And so the way he pays for his health insurance premiums, we have adjusted gross income, and then it's adjusted for his payroll and his health insurance premium, and that's his modified adjusted gross income. So that just really has to do with the extra line items that you might have when you're have unique aspects to your tax return. But it's a good question, Judy. I think though the 100% cash deduction is on your adjusted gross income and not your modified. Wendy, if you can go to the next page. Okay, now the really fun part, I'm going to talk very briefly at When I Die, because I think all of us who support Together Women Rise, we know that our efforts and hopes for global equality for women and girl power is going to take perhaps more than our lifetime to achieve, although hopefully I'm wrong about that. So I want to talk just a tiny bit about not just giving immediately, but some simple ways that if you wanted to change your way of giving after you passed away, here's some things to simply think about. So the simplest thing you can do is going back to that retirement plan. If you have a retirement plan, it always has a beneficiary designation. In fact, when you're doing your sort of checklist as everything in order in my financial life, always important to go online and make sure that Vanguard or your 401k plan has your beneficiaries listed out. And the beauty of naming a charity to your retirement plan rather than a child, for example, let me give you an example. So at my death, my husband and I want to tithe again our 10%. And so we are living 10% of our estate to charity. And what we've actually done is we've gone in and named our charities to our retirement plans, because if we pass away and those assets went to our daughter, she has to take that money out and pay income taxes on it. If we leave that money to a charity, once again, if you name the charity directly on your beneficiary designation, the charity receives that money, income and estate tax-free. So if you have any charitable intent at your death, you absolutely want to consider first thinking about changing your beneficiary designations. You also should always consult with your attorney, but that's not something they have to do for you. You just get the new form and fill out. I would call up the charity. I would say that and say, what's the exact legal name? I had a client one time thought she was giving to the charity, but she'd written out their political action committee name instead. And so it did not go tax-free. So call up the charity, get their legal name, and put that in your retirement plan designation. And you can split it up. You can do a third, 15%, 5%. You can split it with your children and a charity, however you want to do that. One thing I'm going to talk about a tithe. For some people, that's an important faith concept, but I've also heard more and more people talking about thinking about their estate planning and considering charity as an additional child. So if they have 3 children, they are making a decision. We're going to split our estate in 4s, quarter to charity and the other 3/4 to each of our children individually. I think that's something you would want to have a family conversation about. Make sure that the children are in the loop, because as children, we often equate love and money as a very normal thing. And so if you don't want to send the message of, I don't love you as much, it's more about here's how our values are. But I increasingly hear people think about doing it that way. I'm not going to talk about a charitable remainder trust very much. I can answer questions, but increasingly people are giving, there's a popularity back to giving assets to a charitable remainder trust that you set up with your lawyer. You get a charitable deduction based on your age, because the charity doesn't get the money right away. They get the money at your death. So the IRS says, well, I'm only going to let you deduct what the value will be in the future, which will be less because you're going to take income back. So let's say I'm retired and I want to have an income stream, but I want to help charity at my death. That's a smart thing to think about. And then finally, for your children or other important people in your life, I would consider writing an ethical will. There's a great book called The Forever Letter. And in that, I have found with my clients who've done this and passed away, their children value their ethical will as much as the real will, because the family members, their mom talks about their values. And you could include, why was Together Women Rise important to me, or whatever your philanthropic values will be. So there's just some tips on planning for death. Legacy planning is a fancy way to say it. Financial advisors get comfortable with death and dying because we plan for that and we celebrate our clients' lives all the time, even after they are no longer with us. So Wendy, I'm just going to go to the resource slide and then we will open it up to questions. As I said, I've got the book, The Forever Letter in here. I've got some resources on how to think about your values and money and giving on your own, with your children, with your family, some resources around women in philanthropy, and then the various resources for donor advised funds, Vanguard, Fidelity, and Schwab. So that'll be in the circulated with the recording. And then finally, I always love to have these to have a call to action, and then we can go to questions and answers, hopefully. So, oops, did my call to action? Maybe my call, there we go. Sorry, when I confuse it. So I would love everyone, the thing is that we have so much to give. We have time, we have talent, we have treasure, we have ties. I think about that as network. So I would love from everybody to sit down and think about, how do I want to give my time, talent, treasures, and ties? Then pick 3 resource items, pick 3 items from the resource list, and do a little more homework about something that sparked your interest in a way you want to give differently or more valuably. And then if you want to sort of get into how you're going to communicate your values and vision, block time on your calendar. I always have to double mine, so that you're discussing your vision and values with your family or your friends. So I do think that has a very valuable impact on the long term, not just the dollars, but sharing your vision of why you're giving with other people inspires them to give too. So Wendy, I'm going to open it up for Q&A, and certainly people feel free to jump in and answer too. That you may have a different experience of something that you want to share with us.
Hi, this is Marcia Seal from Seattle.
Hey, Marcia.
Hi. I have a donor advised fund and I'm very happy with it. You do have to designate beneficiary charities for when you die, because it ends when you die. So
Yeah.
It's nice, you can think ahead, like if you want to have 5 or 7 or whatever number you want to do. And I did do that $100,000. It's pretty nifty. You don't get taxed on the money that comes out of your IRA. It's really a wonderful device. I felt like this wonderful philanthropist. It was so great. But I will say, if you're giving money to charities, be sure, as Cheryl said, get the exact name. And more importantly, I have mine at Schwab, my donor advised fund.
Marcia, you froze out. I'm going to just say 2 things when we want Marcia to come back on and talk. You can designate where you want.
And somehow the League of Women Voters in Maine got my contribution. It was supposed to go to Seattle, but had we used the right EIN number, that we would not have had that problem. Just a little tip.
Marcia, that's great. And I really appreciate that. And one thing I will add, you have 2 choices on your donor advised fund. You can designate where it goes to your death, or you can nominate someone to step in and make those distributions for you. So
Yes.
Some clients designate where they want it to go, and some say, I'm going to have like in my case, my daughter will step in for me and my husband when we're dead, and she will make those choices for us. So you have those 2 ways of doing it.
Well, that's good. Can I share one last thing?
Oh, Marcia, you go. Yes.
Okay. I used to be an investment advisor, but anyway, my investment advisor and I were talking, and she had this idea, and it was so great. My grandkids really don't need more stuff. And so
Marcia, we're losing your audio. We can't hear you.
And it's a way for me to get more money out of my estate and to teach my grandchildren a little bit about charity and philanthropy.
Can you say that again, Marcia? Your audio went completely out for a bit. What was it that you did with your grandchildren?
Okay, my investment advisor and I discussed this. It was her idea. And I set up for my 5 grandchildren charitable accounts at Schwab. And they will each have to give money from that account to charities every year. They will have to learn how to research charities and to think about where they want to be generous in the world. And I think this will be a good opportunity for them to learn about charity and philanthropy. And it's a good way for me.
Marcia, that's a wonderful idea, and I will just piggyback on that. One of the books in the resources, a book by Ron Lieber called The Opposite of Spoiled. And the reason I put that in there is he does a wonderful job of talking about how to communicate values to your children around money, but it would be equally powerful to use around children and or with your grandchildren. And he has a whole chapter on how he and his family, when his daughter was like 7, they would sit down and begin to discuss they were going to give away X as a family this year, and what did they want to give to as a family. And I thought it's an amazing book, and I think that's an amazing skill to teach your children.
I didn't hear the name and the author. My internet is getting off and on.
So it's a book called The Opposite of Spoiled. It's written by Ron Lieber, who's the New York Times money columnist, and it's a really well-written book for those of you who want to explore money and values with children or grandchildren.
Thank you. And also, what was the author, please, of The Forever Letter?
The author of The Forever Letter, I think her name is Jamie. Let me see if I can see this on here.
I can't read the resource, it's too tiny.
Yeah, her name is Elena, Elana Ziman, Zaiman. It's The Forever Letter, Writing What We Believe for Those We Love.
Great, thank
It's
you.
a beautiful resource. And the other thing I'll send to Wendy, she can send with the recording and the slides, is I have a little handout on researching charities. So that was a great point, Marcia. I have a little handout that's all of the organizations that you can go online and use as a resource to see, is a charity doing what it should.
I would love to get that for my grandkids.
Yeah, and Betsy, I'll send that to you and Wendy, and you can send that with the
Can I ask Marcia a question?
Yeah, Connie, go.
Do you put money in the account for your children, for your grandchildren to give away? Is that what you do? Because we missed that in your
Well, I'm sorry. I'll tell you what I did. I set up 5 charitable accounts at Charles Schwab. And I put $10,000 in each one. And then over the years, they will be taking money out of that, directly giving them to charities. And of course, it has to be in my name because they're still young children. But
Right.
the youngest is 9 and the oldest is 24. He's not so young. But I think it'll be a good learning opportunity for them. And they are blessed to be in a family of good resources. So they've got to start thinking about charitable responsibility.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Betsy, were you trying to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little detail about my experience with donor advised funds, which I've been using for about a decade. When I inherited some when my parents passed away, I put a certain percentage of it into that and had a great deal of joy really in dispersing that portion on their, they weren't very sophisticated, but it was nice to know that it was done in their memory. But I discovered that if you give to small charities, their records are not always up to date with the donor advised funds. And it had not really occurred to me to check to make sure that the recipient had received it. So last year I discovered a couple of cases where the checks, they just put up after a month or two that the checks were never cashed or that they received the envelope back. I just did a bunch of disbursements the other day, and it looks like Dining for Together Women Rise uses electronic funds transfer, which is pretty much instant. So it was very reassuring to look and see that Together Women Rise and several other places where I sent gifts had already received the money electronically. But especially in a case with donor advised funds where you don't communicate directly with the entity, they're not looking for it. They're not going to miss the fact that your check didn't arrive because they don't know it's coming. So it's wise to check it once in a while.
I had the same experience. You have to write hurt on some of them. They don't know what a donor advised fund is. I wish somebody
And this is Betsy Dunklin. Can I?
Please.
ask-
That's
I
Lacey,
want to
yeah.
ask Betsy Touche because she's going to get something, just turned 72. And so having to do those qualified deductions. And my wonderful husband's been training me that I need to not quit doing it online like I love to do and use the IRA. But I have to get the address and type it in and get Vanguard to mail a check directly there. And it always makes me a little nervous because I don't know if it's actually gotten there. And I have not seen an option for electronic fund transfer. Of course, that's not a donor advised fund. That's an IRA.
It's not, it's not your option. You don't decide. The charity just works out with Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab how they want to receive the funds. And once they've moved away from paper and given the financial institution their bank account information, that's how it can go directly.
Because they have many donors using that option. And so,
Yeah, usually in every case of this last round I did, the EIN number and the charity was there already. It's really these little tiny,
right.
you know, one person, and
Mhm.
she moves and doesn't think to, maybe she's only gotten a few gifts for her. Not something the size of Together Women Rise. It's little tiny ones.
I forgot one detail I should have said. I actually used Microsoft shares. I got Microsoft stock, well, the year that it went public. And so I have quite a bit. And I've never sold it, but I've given it away. And it's just it's like a goose that lays golden eggs every year. But anyway, what I did with these charitable accounts for the 5 grandchildren is I funded it with Microsoft's shares. And then we've put it into more diversified investments within the little funds.
Cheryl, I think Karen has a question.
Yeah, and I just kind of love for you talking. I'm just going to say one thing about Betsy's point. If it were me, I would absolutely notify the charity if it's going out by check that it's coming. I think it doesn't happen often, but it happens often enough that there is the mail doesn't get there. The charity, the treasurer doesn't know. So I think that's a really important point that unfortunately you might need to be your own administrator a bit more, particularly for, you know, Healing Icons in Columbia, South Carolina, where it's a one woman nonprofit. So very good point, Betsy. And very good point on the checks for qualified charitable distributions. So yes, Karen, I'm sorry, please. Yes.
No, that's okay. Hey, Cheryl, how are you?
Hey, Karen.
Hi, nice to see you.
I know.
I had a question regarding RMDs from an inherited IRA. Do you need your trustee involved in that, or can you manipulate that yourself? Do you need to get that?
I'm pretty sure, Karen, that you cannot make a qualified charitable distribution from an inherited IRA. I think you can only do them. I will email you and confirm that, but I'm pretty sure you can only do them from rollover IRAs or individual, the classic contributory IRAs.
Okay. All right.
I should put that on as a qualifier. Yeah. Because
Okay.
more and more people have inherited IRAs.
Okay. That was
I
my
don't
question.
know why the government excludes those. It drives me crazy, but
Okay. Well, I'm glad we asked because I would
Yeah.
have assumed we could have done that. Mhm.
yeah, you cannot do that from the inherited.
Okay. Thanks.
And I don't know if that'll change, just to if you ever get a chance to lobby anybody, you know, the laws have changed now, which makes it even more interesting to make a charity your beneficiary retirement account. It used to be when your children inherited, they could stretch it out over their lifetime. The law changed 2 years ago. They have to take it out in 10 years. Now they don't have to take it out in tenths. They can wait till the end and take it out. But I'm wondering if that won't put some pressure into the system for people to be able to give qualified charitable distributions. I think it's just a glitch that they haven't thought of.
Well,
So
If
is
okay.
that-
anybody's out there has an advocacy ear, that's something you should add.
So Cheryl, that's even if a spouse inherits the IRA, it doesn't
No,
matter
a
who it
spousal
inherits.
IRA, you can do it because that's not that is a good clarifying question, Dee. That's a spousal rollover IRA. It is not an inherited IRA. Technically, so you can absolutely give to charity from a spousal rollover IRA.
But how do you title that spousal rollover IRA?
So your custodian will do that for you. And so I don't want to get too technical. Sometimes after death, you just do a rollover IRA, and sometimes you do a spousal rollover, depending on the age difference and other things. And so when the application is filled out with the brokerage firm, that's how it gets titled spousal rather than inherited. That happens on their end.
Okay, thank you.
Just one small point. When I first opened a donor advised fund, as I mentioned, after a death and an inheritance, it was in 2008, I believe. And it never had occurred to me that the amount in the account would decrease because the stock market up until then had only always gone up. But it can, and it did. It came back, but people need to realize it's not it's a flexible number.
And Betsy, I'm gonna tell you something funny. In my donor advised fund, even though my own portfolio is super aggressive because I do this every day, my donor advised fund, this is crazy, it's always all in cash. I don't invest it because I want those dollars to go. And usually I have a 3-year time frame, not a 10-year time frame. So I think part of that is if you're thinking you're going to give the money away in 3 years or less, I would treat it fairly conservatively. If you do have a 10-year or longer time horizon, then I would think about, going something more aggressive than that. So it's a very good point. And look at me, I don't even invest mine.
Cheryl, what about Roth or Keogh?
So Roth, you wouldn't, so 2 things about the Roth. One, it's a great, the Roth is tax-free, so that'd be the last thing you would give to charity. You would always give that to children's funds, and you cannot make a qualified charitable distribution from a Roth, but you don't have to make a required distribution from a Roth.
Right.
So it's sort of out of the system. On a Keogh, such a great question, because I've only ever, so here's what I don't know the answer to that. What I would do with the Keogh is go ahead and roll it over into a rollover IRA, unless there's a reason you cannot do it.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that, Georgia, but I will email Wendy tomorrow about that.
Okay.
So the rest of y'all, Keogh is that was a retirement plan option in the 80s, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
That went away, but if you have one, you can still keep it. But it's an ERISA plan, so I don't know if they put it into the 401k category or if they put it in the IRA category. But I'll find out and I'll email Wendy tomorrow and she can forward that to you. It's a very good question. But I know if just one thing to think about, George, is that unless there's a reason to keep it in the Keogh, you can always take Keogh money and put it in a rollover IRA.
Okay.
Just remember not to take the money out. Make it roll over to the new entity, not get into your hands.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I love that we're teaching each other. This is more fun than I can remember having a long time. I'm learning. Betsy, I think we promised everyone we'd be done at 8:45, so I feel like we're already imposing on their good.
Okay, all right. Any
Unless
last
there's a question?
Cheryl?
Maybe I'll.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Hello.
Yeah, Cheryl, I just want to thank you so much for
Cheryl.
telling us your very beautiful philosophy of giving and also sharing your incredible expertise. It was very generous of you. Thank you.
Wow, thank y'all for indulging me in the hotel room. And I will get the question around the Keogh out tomorrow. And I don't know, I think we answered everything else. I'm going to give you all the charity, the list of charity assessment websites.
That's great. But before we jump up, I just want to throw in 2 quick reminders, messages from RISE. One, just to remember that we're still in the middle of our annual appeal. This, of course, is when we ask all our wonderful members to make one final donation at the end of the year. Our annual appeal supports all of our grant programs as well as our community building and learning programs. So if you've already donated to the annual appeal, thank you so much. And if you haven't, no problem, you have till December 31st. And now you have all the tools that Cheryl has given you. And just one other quick reminder that we're doing our national webinar for December is tomorrow night. We'll have speakers from both our featured and sustained grantees for this month. That's Comera in Rwanda and the Blink Now Foundation in Nepal. So you can come tomorrow night, hear about those amazing grantees, and you can always find links to those events on our website under the Join Now tab. Wendy, did I leave anything out?
No, I just put the slide up.
Oh,
if
that's what I
anyone-
left out. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you have questions that relate in any way to giving to Together Women Rise, we want to talk to you very much. So we've got 2 suggestions. You can either reach out directly to our finance director, Pam, and that's her email address, pam@togetherwomenrise.org. If you have, you want to make a stock transfer or you have technical questions of any kind, or if there's any other issues that you want to discuss about a donation, then contact me and my address is there.
I know that some of you, there were a couple comments about, you're not sure if the charity got the donation. We're always happy to check for you. If a certain amount of time has gone by where we should have gotten it, just email, you can email Pam and she'll check to make sure that we got it. If you want to know where to find our EIN, to make sure it definitely does go to us, you can find that on our website under the About tab. There's a sub-tab for financial information, and we post all of our IRS 990 forms, and right at the top of your IRS 990 is the EIN number. Or you can email us and we'll pass it along to you. But if you're thinking, geez, where can I find it? It is right there on the website under the financial information. And that way you know for sure that, but we are going by Together Women Rise officially now. That is who we are with the IRS. So in case you're wondering about the name change.
I have one comment. It's very hard for many charities to find the EIN number easily. And I do not understand why it isn't right in our faces everywhere, because nobody can do anything scandalous with that number.
I think that it's in Charity Navigator.
No,
Yeah.
but I mean, when they're sending out all these postcards and
Oh,
Giving
yeah.
Tuesday and blah, 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 they never give you the EIN number. You have to research it, or you have to email, or you have to go to the
Yeah.
website.
It was suggested at the board that when we send out solicitations, we include it on the form. I think Marcia thinks that's a good idea.
I agree.
It is actually on there.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yes, we always make sure that it's on any mailing that we send out, but I'm just wondering why we couldn't put it, like where we have the contact information right on the homepage of the website. Like,
Make it easy, make it easy.
Good idea.
I don't see any reason why we shouldn't, but I'll check on it just to make sure. But yeah, why not make it really easy?
Could be also in the footnote, where the.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Right.
This has been very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, very much. Enjoyed it very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. We
Great fun.
appreciate it.
Have a nice holidays, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Thank
Happy
you.
Holidays.
Take care.
Yeah.
Everybody stay safe.
Happy Hanukkah. Bye.
Bye.